On a damp and restless night in Oregon, a retired Army veteran named Michael Hale thought the rain would be his only companion. He was driving home along a flooded back road when his headlights caught something small. A boy standing alone in the downpour, clutching a cardboard sign that read, "Puppy for sale." In the boy's arms, a trembling German shepherd whined softly beneath a soaked towel. When Michael stepped closer, he saw a silver pendant around the boy's neck, the same one his lost love Grace had worn before vanishing years ago. He didn't know it yet, but stopping for that child would uncover a truth buried by betrayal and give him a second chance at the family he thought the war had stolen forever. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling since dawn, a steady, bone-soaking curtain that turned the mountain town of Maple Hollow into a watercolor of gray. The sky sagged low over the ridges, and the mist rolled down from the evergreens like smoke from an invisible fire. Puddles gathered in the dirt roads, and the old wooden porches dripped in rhythm with the heartbeat of the storm. It was the kind of rain that seemed to whisper about old sins and unfinished wars, fitting weather for a man like Michael Hale. Michael was in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with the solid build of a man once trained to carry both weapons and guilt. His hair, once chestnut, had silvered around the temples, and a short beard framed a face carved by hard years. The deep lines across his forehead were not from age, but memory. Memories of deserts and thunder, of brothers lost and commands obeyed too late. His right hand still bore a faint scar across the knuckles, a relic from shrapnel, though he never talked about it. He drove an old Chevy pickup that rattled with every bump, its heater weak and its radio long dead, much like his faith in miracles. The windshield wipers dragged back and forth in slow defiance against the downpour as he guided the truck along the winding mountain road. His only companion was the rhythmic hum of rain and the faint smell of pine from the air vent. Maple Hollow lay just ahead, a quiet logging town that time had mostly forgotten. He had bought a small farm there with his veteran's pension and the last of his savings. It wasn't much, a few acres of overgrown pasture, a leaning barn, and a sagging porch. But it was far from everything that haunted him. Or so he'd hoped. As the truck turned past an old gas station long boarded up, Michael caught sight of movement on the roadside. At first he thought it was a stray dog. Then he saw the shape of a boy, small, maybe 8 years old, standing in the rain beside a flickering street lamp. The child held a piece of soggy cardboard over his head, its edges bent, and the words scrawled across it barely legible. "Puppy for sale? Need help for mom?" He was drenched to the bone, wearing an oversized gray hoodie that clung to his thin frame, jeans soaked up to the knees, and sneakers dark with mud. In his arms was a small German shepherd puppy wrapped in a faded towel, shivering. The boy's face, pale under the streetlight, was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes, large, hazel, and too old for his age, still held something fragile and burning. Hope. Michael slowed the truck and pulled over, the tires crunching through gravel and puddles. He stepped out, his boots sinking slightly into the muddy roadside. Rain immediately began to bead on his jacket, and the cold bit through the layers of flannel and denim. "Hey there, kid," he called, voice rough but steady. "You shouldn't be out here in this weather." The boy flinched slightly but didn't run. His voice trembled as he answered, "Sir, I'm just trying to sell him. My mom's sick, and the hospital says she needs medicine. I don't have much time." The puppy whimpered in his arms, its fur a mix of sable and black, the signature coat of a purebred German shepherd. It was no older than 10 weeks, its ears still floppy, its paws too big for its body. When Michael crouched down to eye level, the dog looked up at him with unblinking amber eyes, as if measuring the man's soul. "What's your name, son?" he asked. "Jonah," the boy replied. His small fingers clutched the towel tighter. The name hung in the rain like a cord struck too softly to fade. Michael reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled handkerchief, and handed it to him. "Here, for your hands." Jonah hesitated before taking it, murmuring a quiet thank you. Michael could see the boy's lips turning blue, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Where's your mom now?" he asked. Jonah glanced down the road, where a faint orange glow marked the direction of town. "At the hospital. She's been there 2 days now. The doctor said she needs antibiotics and food. I tried to work at the store, but they said I'm too small, so I thought maybe someone would buy Max." He looked down at the puppy with guilt, and the animal licked his chin as if forgiving him. Michael felt something twist deep inside him, a memory, sharp and sudden, of another child he once saw crying in a war-torn village, clutching a puppy in the rubble. Back then, he had walked away because orders were orders. Now the years and ghosts behind him left no such excuse. "Listen," he said softly. "You keep your pup. He looks like a good one. I'll get you something to eat and a few dollars for your mom's medicine." He reached into his jacket for his wallet. As he did, the rain caught a glint around Jonah's neck, a silver pendant faintly shining beneath the lamplight, 2 angel wings intertwined around engraved initials, GH. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Michael froze, staring. "That necklace," he said quietly, his voice dropping to a whisper almost lost to the rain. Jonah blinked. "It was my mom's. She said it belonged to someone special once." "Why?" Michael's hand trembled. His mind raced through time. 10 years back, another storm, another farewell. Grace Harper, the only woman he ever loved. She had worn that same pendant when she left for an assignment overseas. They were supposed to meet again after his final tour, but she vanished instead, reported missing near Kabul. No body, no answers, just silence. He swallowed hard, his pulse hammering. "Jonah," he said slowly. "Your mom's name. What is it?" The boy hesitated. "Grace. Grace Harper." The sound of her name cut through him like a blade, clean and deep. His throat went dry. For a moment he could only stare at the boy, at the pendant, at the impossible reflection of the past standing before him in the rain. The resemblance was subtle but undeniable now. Jonah's nose, the curve of his brow, even the way his lower lip quivered before he spoke. The same as hers. He looked down at the puppy again, still shivering against Jonah's chest. "What's his name?" Michael asked, trying to steady his voice. "Max," the boy said. "He was born behind our old house. Mom said dogs like him protect people they love." Michael gave a faint smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. "She's right about that." He crouched lower, letting the puppy sniff his glove. Max licked his hand, tail wagging once, a gesture small but full of trust. The rain intensified, drumming on the truck's hood. Michael straightened. "All right," he said. "You and Max are coming with me. We'll get you both warm, and tomorrow I'll take you to see your mom." Jonah blinked in surprise. "Really? But you don't even know us." Michael looked out at the empty road stretching into mist. "Sometimes, kid," he murmured. "You don't need to know someone to recognize them." He opened the truck door and helped Jonah climb inside. Max curled immediately onto the boy's lap, shaking off droplets. As Michael slid behind the wheel, he caught a glimpse of their reflection in the rearview mirror. The boy, the dog, and the pendant glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. For the first time in years, something stirred in him that wasn't bitterness or regret. It was fragile, unsteady, but real. Hope. The truck rumbled forward through the flooded streets, wipers fighting the rain. The neon sign of a diner flickered by, half-lit and forgotten. Beyond it, the hospital lights burned faintly against the night. Somewhere in that sterile glow lay Grace Harper, alive, breathing, waiting. Michael tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his heart pounding like distant thunder. The storm outside no longer mattered. The one he'd been carrying for a decade had just broken open, and every drop of rain felt like the world was washing his past back to shore. The rain had eased by dawn, but Maple Hollow was still draped in mist, the kind that clung to everything and refused to let go. The town's single hospital, Maple Hollow General, stood on the outskirts, a low concrete building stained by years of storms and neglect. Its parking lot gleamed wet under the gray sky, puddles reflecting the flicker of a broken street lamp. Michael parked the old Chevy in the far corner, the engine ticking faintly as it cooled. Jonah sat beside him, cradling Max, the puppy's head tucked under his chin. The boy's eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion. "You did good, kid," Michael said quietly. Jonah nodded, half asleep, his small hands buried in the dog's fur. "Mom's in room 12, he murmured. "End of the hall." Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and coffee gone stale. The linoleum floors squeaked beneath Michael's boots as he walked past pale corridors, lined with muted posters about flu shots and blood drives. Nurses moved like ghosts through the early light. The hospital was old, but clean. The kind of place that tried to look hopeful, but couldn't quite hide its weariness. When they reached room 12, Michael stopped at the doorway. The blinds were half drawn, soft light filtering through the rain-streaked window. On the bed lay Grace Harper. For a moment, his breath caught in his throat. She was thinner than he remembered, her once strong frame now fragile, her skin pale against the white sheets. Her hair, still a rich auburn though streaked with gray, spilled loosely over her shoulders, damp from fever sweat. Even now, despite the hollow cheeks and tired eyes, she carried the same quiet strength that had first drawn him to her 10 years ago. She had always been the kind of woman who looked directly into storms and asked what they were hiding. Jonah ran to her side, his voice soft. "Mom, I brought someone." Grace stirred, her lashes fluttering open, her eyes, still that deep green he remembered, met his, and for a moment, the world went silent. "Michael?" she whispered, disbelief and tears mixing in her voice. He stepped closer, unable to speak. "You're alive," he finally managed. She smiled faintly. "And so are you." A nurse entered quietly, a woman in her late 40s with a kind face, light brown skin, and short curls tucked under a white cap. Her name tag read, Nurse Helen. She carried a clipboard and a soft smile that didn't quite hide the fatigue in her eyes. "I see we've got a reunion," she said gently. "But let's keep it calm, all right? Mrs. Harper needs rest." Grace nodded weakly, and Helen adjusted her IV with practiced hands. "You're lucky, honey," the nurse added, glancing at Michael. "Your boy hasn't left her side all night." When Helen left, closing the door behind her, silence filled the room again, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor and the whisper of rain against glass. Michael sat down on the edge of the chair beside her bed. "I thought you were dead," he said. "They told me you were caught in an explosion outside Kabul. I looked for you for years." Grace's eyes clouded. "They wanted you to believe that." She coughed softly, reaching for a glass of water. Her hand trembled, and Michael steadied it. Her fingers felt cold, almost fragile. "I didn't disappear because I wanted to," she continued after a moment. "After the Black Mesa investigation, I uncovered something I shouldn't have. Proof that high-ranking officers were funneling weapons through private contractors. They weren't just looking the other way. They were orchestrating it. She paused, the pain of memory flickering across her face. When I confronted one of them, they warned me, disappear or die. I thought I could handle it. But when I found out I was pregnant, everything changed. Michael froze. The hum of the hospital seemed to vanish around them. Pregnant, he repeated quietly, his voice almost breaking. Grace nodded. Jonah is your son. He stared at her, unable to breathe for a moment, his mind filled with images, the boy's eyes, his voice, even the way he held the puppy in the rain. It all made sense now. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Grace's voice trembled. Because I couldn't. They were watching me. I knew if I reached out, they'd find us both. I used new documents, changed my name. I thought maybe one day when it was safe. Her words faltered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Michael leaned forward, his rough hands closing around hers. You did what you had to. But it's over now. I'll protect you both. Grace shook her head slowly. It's not over, Michael. They still know I'm alive. Someone's been paying my hospital bills under another name. She reached to the bedside table and pulled out a folded paper, a billing statement with a signature scrawled at the bottom. Victor Kane. The name hit Michael like a jolt. Kane, he muttered. I've heard that name. He had. Years ago, during his last deployment, there had been rumors of a contractor named Victor Kane who handled special operations for the Department of Defense. He was known for cleaning up problems that couldn't be made official, ruthless, smart, and loyal to whoever paid him most. Grace saw recognition in his eyes. He's not a contractor anymore, she said. He works for someone they call the broker. He's the one who forced me underground. The broker runs what's left of Black Mesa, laundering money, weapons, information, and Kane, he's his right hand. Michael rose and paced to the window. Outside, the rain had turned to drizzle. The world felt deceptively calm. You still have the proof? He asked. Grace nodded weakly. A flash drive, hidden. I couldn't destroy it. It's the only leverage I have left. Jonah, who had been sitting quietly with Max at his feet, looked up at his mother. Mom, are they bad men? Grace reached out, brushing a hand through his damp hair. They're just people who forgot what right means. A shadow fell across the hallway outside, the faint silhouette of a man lingering near the door. Michael caught it in the reflection of the window. He moved silently to the threshold and opened it suddenly, but the hall was empty except for the sound of the night fell heavy over Maple Hollow, dragging a curtain of black clouds across the mountains. Rain poured down in relentless sheets, beating against the hospital windows like impatient fists. In the dim light of room 12, the hum of the machines grew quieter, drowned out by the storm outside. Michael stood near the window, his reflection ghosting across the glass, his jaw tense, his mind running through possibilities. Grace slept fitfully, her fever finally easing. Jonah curled on the couch beside her, Max nestled against his side. But Ranger, Michael's German shepherd, a large 5-year-old male with a thick sable coat and the alert, steady eyes of a trained military dog, was pacing near the door, ears pricked. The dog had always sensed danger before humans did, and tonight his low growl rolled through the room like a warning drumbeat. Michael turned sharply. What is it, boy? Ranger's nose was lifted, nostrils flaring toward the hallway. A second later, Michael heard it too, the muffled hum of an engine outside, then another, heavier one. SUV tires on wet asphalt. He moved to the window, his instincts flaring like old wounds. 2 black vehicles were parked under the streetlight, engines running, silhouettes shifting inside. He recognized the stance of men trained to move in silence. His gut turned cold. Kane had found them. Michael crossed the room in 3 long strides. "Grace, wake up! We have to go!" Her eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to fear. "Now?" "Now," he said sharply, pulling her coat from the chair. Jonah stirred, blinking. "Dad?" The word caught him off guard, but there was no time to process it. "Put your shoes on, kid. Grab Max." Ranger barked once, short and clipped, the kind of bark that meant move. They slipped out the back corridor, the emergency exit alarm disabled by a trick Michael had learned long ago. 2 wire clips pressed together to short the contact. Rain rushed in as he pushed the door open. It hit them like a wall, cold and punishing. The parking lot glistened with reflections of the SUV headlights cutting through fog. "Stay low," Michael whispered. He guided Grace beneath the cover of a walkway, his hand steadying her weak steps. She leaned heavily against him, her breath ragged but determined. Jonah followed close, clutching Max beneath his jacket. The puppy trembled but didn't make a sound. They reached the alley behind the hospital. Mud splashed underfoot, the rain now mixed with wind, slicing across their faces. Michael scanned the dark street ahead. No movement, only the distant echo of engines revving. He pointed toward the slope beyond the town, where the faint outline of the forest loomed. "This way. There's an old freight yard near the tracks. We can hide there until morning." Grace nodded weakly. "You still think like a soldier," she whispered. He gave a grim smile. "A soldier who's out of options." The group made their way through, back streets slick with rain. Streetlights buzzed and flickered above them, throwing erratic pools of light on puddled asphalt. Ranger moved ahead, his tail straight, body low, scanning every shadow. At one point, a car door slammed nearby, and Michael froze, pulling Grace and Jonah into a doorway. 2 men in dark raincoats moved past, their earpieces glinting under the streetlight. Victor Kane's men. Kane himself was sitting in the SUV at the edge of the hospital parking lot, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. He was in his mid-40s, tall, broad, with close-cropped black hair and a scar slicing across his left cheek, a souvenir from his days as a private military contractor in Iraq. His eyes were pale gray, sharp as cut steel, the eyes of a man who had seen too much death to believe in mercy. A faint smirk touched his lips as he spoke into the radio. "They're moving north," he said. "Take the side roads. Don't spook them yet. I want the drive." He flicked the cigarette into the puddle, where it hissed out. "Grace Harper," he muttered. "You should have stayed dead." By the time Michael and the others reached the freight yard, the storm had turned brutal. The wind howled through the pine trees, bending them like reeds. The tracks gleamed under the lightning flashes, and the skeletal remains of old warehouses rose from the dark like forgotten sentinels. Michael led them into one of the smaller buildings, a corrugated metal structure with a single flickering light inside. The place smelled of rust, oil, and rain. He closed the door behind them, bolting it with a rusted chain. Inside, the dim glow from his flashlight illuminated crates stacked against the walls, tarps hanging from the ceiling, and a few abandoned tools. Grace sank onto an overturned crate, trembling. Her wet hair clung to her face, her breathing uneven. Michael pulled off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. Jonah sat beside her, Max curled in his lap, licking the rain from his fingers. Ranger stood guard near the door, his ears flicking at every sound. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence between thunderclaps was thick enough to choke on. Then Grace reached into the inside pocket of her coat and drew out a small metal flash drive. It was taped shut with faded masking tape, edges worn smooth by time. "This is what they want," she said, her voice low but steady. "The financial records, the shipment manifests, photographs of their offshore accounts, everything that can tie Kane and the broker to Black Mesa." Michael took the drive carefully, turning it in his fingers. "You kept this all these years?" "It's the only thing that kept Jonah alive," she whispered. "They think I destroyed it. That's why they're here." Her eyes glistened in the flickering light. "If they find us, they'll kill us both. And anyone who helps." Michael pocketed the drive. "Then we make sure they don't." He crouched beside Jonah. The boy was watching him intently, eyes wide and serious beyond his age. "You did good tonight," Michael said. "You listened. You stayed quiet. That's what keeps people alive." Jonah looked down, stroking Max's head. "Mom says you used to save people for a living." "I tried," Michael said softly. "Sometimes I failed." Jonah hesitated before whispering, "Can I call you Dad now?" The words hit him harder than any bullet could. For a moment, Michael couldn't answer. The years of silence, the guilt, the self-inflicted exile, all of it crashed inside him like thunder. Grace watched quietly, her eyes soft. Finally, Michael placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Yeah," he said, voice thick. "You can." A sharp noise cracked the silence, the echo of a door slamming somewhere outside. Ranger's ears shot up, his body stiffening. The dog moved to the window, growling low. Michael peered through a gap in the metal wall. Flashlights flickered in the distance. "They found the tracks," he muttered. He turned to Grace. "We move again. Through the rail yard to the woods. If we can reach the old ranger station up the ridge, we can hole up until dawn." Grace tried to stand, but staggered. He caught her, steadying her weight. "I'm not leaving you behind," he said. "Ever again." Outside, the storm roared like a beast awakening. As they stepped back into the rain, the cold bit deep, but the adrenaline burned hotter. Ranger led the way, weaving between train cars, his dark coat blending with the shadows. Jonah clutched Max close, the puppy's small heart beating wildly against his chest. Behind them, the beam of flashlights cut through the darkness like blades. Voices shouted closer now. They reached the edge of the yard, where the tracks disappeared into the forest. Michael turned once more toward the warehouse. He could see Kane's men spilling into the open, guns drawn. He fired a warning shot into the air, then grabbed Grace's hand. "Run!" he shouted. The family plunged into the trees, swallowed by rain and darkness, leaving behind only footprints that the storm was already washing away. The forest closed around them, wet, cold, alive with whispers. But for the first time in years, Michael felt something fierce and pure burn in his chest. He wasn't running from ghosts anymore. He was running towards something worth saving. The forest was still dripping when dawn finally came, pale light leaking through the mist like diluted milk. Michael's group had made it through the night, bruised, soaked, and running on fear and adrenaline. They took refuge in an abandoned ranger cabin halfway up the ridge, the kind that once belonged to fire watch crews before the budget cuts and time drove them away. Now, the roof leaked, the stove was rusted, and moss crept up the outer walls like slow green fire. Still, it was shelter, and for a hunted family, that was enough. Michael sat near the small radio set on the table, tapping the code into the transceiver with steady hands. The device was old, Army-issued, salvaged from a forgotten supply depot years ago. He'd modified it for shortwave bursts, a trick learned during night ops. The signal he sent was brief but unmistakable. "Read, this is Hale. I need extraction. Code Gray. Location 47.2 by 122.6. Urgent, then static." He repeated twice before the line crackled with a faint reply. rough but familiar. "Michael Hale, I thought you were dead." The voice belonged to Captain David Reed. Once Michael's commanding officer, now a federal investigator with the Department of Internal Security. Reed was a man in his late 40s, with a stocky frame, graying hair cropped military short, and a square jaw that always looked tense, as if he carried too many secrets in his teeth. His voice had that same gravelly edge that had once calmed panicked soldiers under fire. "You're supposed to be off the grid, Hale," he said through the static. "If you're calling me, it's bad." Michael exhaled. "Worse than you think. Grace Harper. She's alive." A pause. Then Reed's tone dropped, wary. "Black Mesa?" "And something bigger," Michael said. "I've got proof. Kane's after us. I need a trap, not a rescue." By midday, Reed arrived. His government SUV wound up the forest road under sheets of cold rain, tires hissing over mud. He stepped out wearing a dark trench coat and combat boots polished to a dull sheen, his badge clipped to his belt. His face bore new lines, life under fluorescent lights and political shadows. "You look like hell," he said when he saw Michael. Michael smirked faintly. "Feels mutual." They clasped hands, soldiers first, brothers second. Inside the cabin, Grace sat bundled in a blanket, color returning to her cheeks. She regarded Reed cautiously. Old instincts made her distrust authority. "You're the friend he mentioned?" she asked. Reed nodded, setting his pack down. "Used to be. Now I'm the poor bastard who has to clean up everyone's mess." He turned to Michael. "Tell me everything." They spread the maps across the table. Rail lines, warehouses, access roads. Grace slid the flash drive across the wood surface. "This has everything," she said. "Financial transfers, weapon manifests, encrypted correspondences between the broker and Kane." Reed examined it, his brow furrowing. "You realize if this is real, it implicates half the Department of Defense. Hell, maybe higher." Michael leaned back, voice low. "That's why we don't run. We hit first." He outlined the plan. Bait Kane with a decoy file, lure him into the old freight warehouse they'd passed earlier, then expose his connection to the broker during the exchange. Reed hesitated. "You're setting a trap for a man who commands killers." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then it's about time he met one who doesn't follow orders anymore." By late afternoon, the storm returned, heavier and more merciless than before. The wind screamed through the pines, rain lashing like shrapnel. The group moved to the warehouse by dusk, setting up their positions. Jonah stayed inside the pickup truck parked behind the loading bay, Max curled up beside him. Grace and Reed set the flash drive's decoy, an identical copy loaded with scrambled data, on a crate under the leaking roof. Ranger stood alert near the entrance, his coat darkened to charcoal under the rain, eyes locked on the tree line. Michael adjusted the rifle scope, watching through sheets of water. Then headlights cut through the gloom. 2 black SUVs rolled into the yard, engines rumbling low. Doors opened, boots splashing in mud. Victor Kane stepped out first, coat flaring, pistol holstered but visible. His men fanned out with disciplined precision. Mercenaries, well-trained and unhesitating. "Grace Harper," Kane's voice echoed through the storm. "You've been hard to kill. Let's fix that tonight." He gestured toward the warehouse. "Bring her out, and maybe I'll let the kid live." Michael signaled to Reed, silent hand gestures they'd used in combat. "Hold. Wait for the breach." The thunder drowned out the sound of footsteps as Kane's men advanced. One of them, a tall blonde with a scarred chin, moved toward the side entrance. The door burst open under his boot, and Ranger lunged. The dog's snarl tore through the rain as he knocked the man flat, teeth sinking into his arm. Gunfire exploded, echoing across metal walls. Michael returned fire from the upper loft, his shots precise and economical. One mercenary fell, another ducked behind a truck, the air filled with the smell of wet gunpowder and oil. Reed grabbed Grace, pulling her toward cover. "Stay down!" he shouted. She clutched the crate with the decoy drive, her knuckles white. "They'll burn everything if they find it," she cried. He looked at her, then at Michael. "We need to end this fast." Outside, Jonah screamed. A stray round had shattered the rear window of the pickup. Gasoline dripped from the tank, a spark flaring from a nearby generator. "Jonah!" Michael's voice broke through the chaos as he sprinted from the loft. He dove behind the truck just as the fuel ignited, flames licking upward. Jonah was trapped, his seatbelt jammed. Max barked frantically, pawing at the door. Without hesitation, Ranger leapt through the smoke, his powerful jaws clamping onto the metal handle. The door gave way with a screech. Jonah tumbled out, coughing, Max at his heels. Ranger followed, his fur singed but his tail still high. Michael pulled them both to safety, just as the truck erupted in a blast of orange and blue fire, lighting the rain like daylight. Across the yard, Kane raised his gun. "You can't win this, Hale," he shouted, voice almost drowned by the wind. Michael turned, his eyes cold. "I'm not here to win." He fired once. The bullet caught Kane square in the chest, throwing him backward into the mud. The mercenaries froze as their leader fell. Reed stepped forward, weapon raised, ordering them down. Slowly the men dropped their guns, the fight bleeding out of them as the storm swallowed the sound. Michael approached Kane's body. The man coughed blood, a faint smile twisting his lips. "You think it ends here?" he rasped. "The broker isn't a man, he's a system. He's in every badge, every order, every war. You can't kill that." Lightning flashed, illuminating his gray eyes one last time before they went still. The rain washed the blood away. Reed stood beside Michael, holstering his gun. "He's right, you know," he said quietly. "But maybe we can make the system look itself in the mirror." Michael didn't answer. He looked back toward Grace and Jonah. Mother and son huddled together under the broken roof, Ranger standing guard beside them, chest heaving but proud. For the first time in years, he knew what he was fighting for. Not command, not rank, not duty, just them. By the time dawn touched the mountains again, the storm had broken. The warehouse stood half-burned, steam rising from the puddles. Reed collected the real flash drive, sealing it in a plastic bag. "I'll take this to D.C., he said. "Quietly. You won't hear from me for a while." Michael nodded. "I'll find a place for them. Somewhere off the grid." Reed gripped his shoulder. "Be careful, brother. You're fighting something that doesn't bleed." Michael looked out at the horizon, rain still dripping from his hair. "Then we'll bleed for it," he said. Behind him, Jonah called softly, "Dad, can we go home now?" Michael turned, and despite the ash and smoke, he smiled. "Yeah, kid. Let's go home." The sky over Oregon was a softer gray than the one that used to hang above Maple Hollow. It was the kind of gray that promised warmth instead of warning, peace instead of pain. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the fields outside the small farmhouse glistening like glass. Michael Hale stood on the porch, mug of coffee steaming in his hand, his flannel shirt rolled to the elbows. His hair had grown longer, silver threading through the brown, and his beard was fuller now, less the mask of a soldier, more the quiet mark of a man who had finally stopped running. The lines on his face seemed lighter, softened by the laughter that had slowly returned to the corners of his mouth. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Grace stepped out, a shawl draped loosely around her shoulders. The morning light caught her auburn hair, making it shimmer with copper hues that reminded him of the woman she'd been before the world broke her. She was still slender, but her movements had regained strength. her skin no longer the pale of sickness but flushed with life. The years of fear had not stolen her beauty, only deepened it into something quieter, more enduring. She smiled when she saw him watching. "You're up early," she said, her voice still carrying that warm lilt that had once carried through desert wind and newsroom chaos alike. "Old habits," he replied, glancing towards the horizon. "The rain woke me." From the field came the sound of barking. Two voices, one deep and steady, the other high and playful. Ranger bounded through the wet grass, his sable coat gleaming, his gait still strong, though the limp in his left leg told of the burns from that night. Max followed close behind, now grown from the trembling puppy into a sturdy young German shepherd, his fur a lighter mix of tan and gray. They chased each other through puddles, tails wagging wildly, their joy unfiltered and alive. Jonah's laughter rose above them, clear and bright. The boy had shot up in height over the past few months, his hair longer, his cheeks sun-kissed. He wore his father's old army jacket, still too big for him, but he wore it with pride. "Breakfast's ready," he shouted toward the porch, holding up a spatula like a sword. "And I didn't burn it this time," Grace chuckled. "We'll see about that." Inside, the house was modest but warm. The walls smelled faintly of cedar and bread. A small wooden cross hung over the hearth, next to a framed photograph of the three of them, taken by Captain Reed the day they'd left the investigation behind. In the picture, Grace's hand rested on Michael's shoulder. Jonah stood between them, and both dogs sat proudly in front. It had taken months for Reed to dismantle the remains of the Black Mesa network. The scandal had swept through Washington like wildfire. Names of generals, contractors, and politicians plastered across every major outlet. When they'd tried to honor Michael for his assistance, he refused. He told Reed over the phone, "I didn't do it for the flag. I did it for what was left of my heart." Reed had only nodded, though Michael could hear the respect in the silence that followed. Captain David Reed had since taken a quieter post in Seattle. He had married a field agent named Angela, the type of woman who could handle his temper and his sense of duty with equal grace. Reed had sent a postcard last month. "If you ever need me, brother, you know how to find me. P.S. You still owe me a bottle of bourbon." Michael kept it pinned to the fridge, next to Jonah's school drawings and Max's first veterinary receipt. That morning, after breakfast, Grace brought out a small wooden box. "I found this while unpacking the last of our things," she said. Inside were 2 silver pendants, the angel wing necklaces that had once separated them across a decade of war and loss. She hung one around his neck, the other she placed on the wall above the dining table, beside a small cross carved from driftwood. When the sunlight filtered through the window, the pendants shimmered faintly, their twin wings reflecting warmth into the room. "Do you ever think," Grace asked softly, "that we were meant to find each other again?" Michael looked at her, the weight of years softening in his gaze. "I used to think rain was just God's way of washing the past away," he said quietly. "But maybe it's how he leads us back to what we were too blind to hold on to." Jonah ran in, cheeks flushed, carrying a muddy stick. "Ranger found something by the fence," Michael laughed. "If it's another frog, it stays outside." "Not a frog," Jonah said. "Something shiny." They followed him out to the field, where the dogs were circling near an old oak. Buried in the soil, half hidden by moss, was a rusted dog tag. Michael knelt, wiping it clean. The name was almost worn away, but the letters still read, Hale, M. It was his own, one he'd lost during the explosion years ago overseas. Grace watched him turn it in his hand, rainwater and sunlight mingling on the metal. "Maybe it's a sign," she said, "that you've finally come home." That evening, as the last rays of the sun stretched across the valley. They sat together on the porch. Grace rested her head on his shoulder. Jonah leaned against his father's side, and the dogs lay at their feet, content. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass, the air sweet with pine and rain. Michael exhaled slowly, feeling the peace settle over him like a blanket. For the first time in his life, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. When the church bell from the town below rang softly through the hills, Grace whispered, "Do you ever miss it? The army? The noise? The danger?" Michael shook his head. "No," he said simply. "I've fought all the wars I needed to. The rest belong to men who haven't found their peace yet." He paused, watching Jonah toss a stick for Max and Ranger to chase. "But I thank God he didn't let me die before I found mine." Later that night, the rain began again, gentle this time, tapping against the tin roof like a lullaby. Michael lay awake beside Grace, listening. He could hear Jonah's slow breathing from the next room, the dogs shifting in their sleep near the fire. On the nightstand, the two pendants caught the moonlight, gleaming faintly, their reflections twining together like two souls forgiven. He reached for Grace's hand, and when she stirred, he whispered, "I don't think rain is our enemy anymore." She smiled without opening her eyes. It never was. You just needed to walk through it to see the sun. Outside, the world glistened anew, washed clean by everything they had survived. Sometimes God doesn't send miracles wrapped in thunder or light. Sometimes He sends them quietly, through the rain that washes our wounds, through a child's voice calling Dad for the first time, or through the loyal eyes of a dog that refuses to give up on us. The miracle in Michael's story wasn't survival. It was transformation. It was learning that even the most broken hearts can find their way home when they follow the light of love and faith. And maybe that's what we all need to remember. Every storm ends, and when it does, the world shines a little cleaner, a little softer, and we realize the rain was never meant to drown us. It was meant to renew us. If this story touched your heart, share it so that someone out there who feels lost might find their way back too. Leave a comment with your prayer, your story, or even just an amen for those still walking through their storms. And don't forget to subscribe to join this circle of faith, compassion, and second chances. May God bless you,